Pretty fast, right?
Hopefully very quickly.
Yeah,
I asked
quickly.
the guys to run an update before, but that was to take out the previously canceled games. So now that there's two, hopefully we'll Alex just said it was updated.
Good, perfect.
So hopefully it caught that news too, because that's newish.
Yeah, how new-ish is it?
Yeah.
I can't get in. All right, there we go. Speed this up. Yeah. All right, well, welcome in a Friday weekend technically, or depending on how you define it. It's 3:47 on the East Coast, so some of you are skipping out on work early just to hang with us on Live Before Lock as we get ready for now a reduced from 13 to 10 game slate, the latest being the Cleveland game, X'd from the schedule there. Terry's in the house. I'm Eytan. Mike Awesemo's producing, and yeah, things just keep getting chopped left and right. Your Mets can't continue whatever the hell that was last night. Rained out.
And my Mets.
Oh yeah, that's right. You're a Yankee fan. I don't know why. I just group all you New Yorkers look the same to me. That's what it is. So I say that as one. And now we're down to 10, my friend. So I feel like it's just going to be all right, down to 10. I don't know if we're in jeopardy of losing another one in the next hour, but at least we have some idea of what's happening right now.
Yeah, I mean, that Cleveland-Baltimore game was the biggie. Cleveland-Toronto game was the biggie. I'm looking at them side by side on this page. That was the big one. We might also lose that Royals-Baltimore game, but I don't really care as much about that one. It didn't have too much interest in the bats on either side of that one. Nobody's playing Carlos Hernandez or Jordan Lyles. I wouldn't really expect. But everybody was looking at Kevin Gausman and Shane Bieber after we lost Garrett Cole and Max Scherzer from this slate. So now you're scratching the other two aces off the top of the board here. And now we've got a much flatter, more broad kind of a pitching slate to work with. We're dealing with like you Darvish, Sandy Alcantara up top, maybe some Luis Garcia, some Nathan Eovaldi. It's a much thinner pitching slate than the one that started out this morning with like 4 or 5 aces on it.
Yep. No, I think looking at it from just that alone, as far as how this thing shrinks and then, moves on from it, what's the first move that you make when you see this, just looking at it, incorporating the other two as well? But you mentioned from a pitching standpoint, are you gaining more exposure to a specific pitcher as a result now of those 3 games being done?
I'm not sure exactly where it'll land because I haven't had time to run anything with Gausman and Bieber scratched, but I do expect that it'll make me a little bit more broad, where if that game was going, I would have had a lot of shares baked into those guys regardless of ownership. It wouldn't have mattered to me. I would have expected a great pitching duel there, and then I would have spread shares to try and get over the field on like a Darvish and Alcantara and a Garcia, but I would have not really stretched out to some of the other options, the Merrill Kellys of the world, the Evaldis of the world necessarily, because I would have had so much baked into the aces, let alone when we had 5 of them to work with in the morning. I wouldn't even have been getting to Darvish and Garcia. So now it's just making me a little bit more broad, which I think plays well for this slate. There's a lot of ways to spread around. You can pay up for a lot of bats with the current configuration of pitching prices. So you can do a lot of different things where the aces were kind of steering everybody toward similar stacking scenarios. So it kind of spreads out the slate and opens it back up to a lot more broad possibilities at this point.
All right, so let's begin. And, we're going to roll down here on the left, and we'll start really those games out, right? So we have to adjust here really quick and make sure that I have it.
Yeah, is KC Baltimore probably our first one then?
Yes, KC Baltimore, sorry. So let's start at Baltimore. And you know what it was? It was and this is what it is. All the time, I'm taking a bullet for you, except for the last time when I tried that and then flipped it on you. You just threw me under the bus. It was your mistake with Baltimore Cleveland that got me thinking for some reason Baltimore was canceled tonight, and it wasn't updated all around. So not only am I throwing you under the bus, but I'm admitting that I didn't have full faith in Awesemo, which I'm sure it all comes back to me at some point. But yes, let's start in Baltimore, KC on the road, and we'll start really with the mound here and how you can gain any leverage at all with what's happening from really either side, if it's Hernandez or moving back all the way down to like what you see with Jordan Lyles.
Yeah. So the first point on this one is it's probably not going to play. It looks really ugly. It looks like the other East Coast games that have already scratched and rained out earlier in the day. They've got, just looking at dark sky right now, light rain through from 5 till 9, then heavier rain from 9 till 7 a.m. Doesn't really look like a lot of windows to stick a baseball game into, but maybe it goes. If it goes, I think it's a bats only situation. I don't think I'd be going to either pitcher. Presumably they would see in-game delays if it does play, and I just don't expect it to. Add to that the fact that neither one of these guys is an overly appealing DFS pitcher in general. You can occasionally squeeze a good start out of Jordan Lyles, but they're infrequent. He doesn't project that way today. I have no interest in Carlos Hernandez. So It would be more about the bats, and they're kind of low rent teams in terms of the bats. That's why I said I didn't really care if this one ended up scratching.
Yeah, you're definitely, as far as cheap options are concerned, and you're not even gaining much leverage, really technically at all, with like a stack in Baltimore's case. So I don't even know how much it's worth it there. Kansas City's a negative leverage squad, and you're paying up a little bit more. So to your point, it's probably not even worth it.
Yeah, both of the teams getting some ownership right now. Assuming the game does play, you could easily see some production out of like an Edward Olivares, Andrew Benintendi, Sal Perez, with Merrifield, that group of hitters that's drawing a lot of popularity on DK going up against Jordan Lyles. Similarly, the Cedric Mullins, Trey Mancini, Anthony Santander, Austin Hayes, Ryan Mountcastle 1 through 5 is also pretty good in general, going up against a pitcher I don't think is any good. So you can get there, but I think the public is there in appropriate amounts. The prices are fair on DK, particularly around the Orioles, but that's what's drawing some attention to them. They're not a great team overall. They haven't been doing well against either hand for power or sequential hitting this year. There are good individual hitters on that team, but I think at the ownership that they're getting, it's just not really worth it. And again, I think the game's just not going to play.
Yeah, Edward P's in Baltimore. Doubt game plays, raining all day. It's nasty here on the East Coast, up and down on the seaboard. So full expectations of that. So now Boston, right? Because we're going to skip through what's going on here with Cleveland and White Sox, just kind of looking at this from a pitching standpoint. You are gaining it, at least from leverage alone. You are gaining a little bit with Velasquez, but you mentioned Eovaldi as well, as far as just being able to get to him a little bit more based on a couple of games that have been scratched.
Yeah, so I think that would lead me to more Nathan Eovaldi. I'll have to update the ownership that I have in my sheet next time you do a read or something, and I'll get to the updated ownership numbers. He was in like the mid-teens on DK, low 11.8% on FanDuel in the last run. Figure he pops by another 5 percentage points on each site, 5 to 10. I think that's going to be appropriate. I think he's in range of that. He's going up against a very good White Sox lineup, but he's a quality pitcher, 28.1% strikeout rate this season, a 2.63 xFIP. 2.6% walk rate. When he does allow contact, he's got a 13% swinging strike rate, which is good, but he's allowing a 12.8% barrel rate, 44.9% hard hit. So there is concern about some of these premium hitters from the White Sox side, and they're all really low owned. So I like the White Sox as a positively leveraged stack. I like the Eovaldi side of this one, and I like the Red Sox as a stack, even though they're extremely popular. The only piece of this game I don't want is Vince Velasquez.
Well, yeah, and we can get to him as far as just the leverage that's available, but it's not a ton by any means. By the way, 31.1% projected ownership on DK for Eovaldi. So to your point about the White Sox stacks, right, you could also gain a lot of leverage against the field based on how many people. Only 3 we have projected north of 30% on DK, and he's one of them.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a major jump. That's a 15-point jump from where he was just on virtue of those 2 pitchers scratching. So you immediately see the impact of where those ownership shares are going. And they're going to, Eovaldi's one of the higher priced guys on the slate. It makes some sense that he slots into that role. I do think there are other options, though. Like if you wanted to go double, not extreme pay down, but double cheap starters with Sandy Alcantara and Luis Garcia, I do not think you're necessarily making a mistake now with both of those 7,700 and 7,400 on DK. Build both of those guys in, go double cheap starters, and then pay for some premium bats. You don't have to go to Eovaldi here. He's in a tough matchup. Luis Garcia is facing the Tigers. Alcantara is facing the Padres. I mean, those guys are in better spots. They're You can't tell me Sandy Alcantara at least is not an equivalent pitcher to Nathan Eovaldi, and I think Luis Garcia is that good as well. I have them both projected higher. So for the money, I don't necessarily think I want to be at that level now. If he's going to 30%, I'd look to come in around 20% maybe on him. Good pitcher in pitching well, but I just don't love the spot for him, and I don't love the price by comparison with where the ownership is on him now.
You mentioned not really getting to Vince Velasquez, if at all, but when you're building 150, when you're building a bunch of lineups, Boston is a negatively leveraged stack. So maybe that's just a transition over there from the bat standpoint as well, because they may correlate. Is there any interest knowing that you can counter a little bit of Boston's ownership if Velasquez does break through, as low of a chance as that may be?
I will, if Vince Velasquez beats me tonight, I'll let him beat me tonight. That's,
Okay.
that's been my approach to this guy for quite a while, and it rarely doesn't come up my way. He is capable of grabbing some strikeouts here and there from time to time. This team does have strikeouts in it. 24.2% strikeout rate over 94 and a third last year, 24.1% over 17 and 2/3 this year. What he also does is walk the world. He puts 11.8% of hitters on base via the walk last year, 8.9% this year. He's got a 1.47 whip. He also allows a ton of hard contact on a home run trajectory, 47.2% hard hit this year, 15.1% of those barrels, 20.9 degree average launch angle. Last season, 43.3% hard hit, 12.2% barrels, 20.6 degree average launch angle. It was a 5 and change percent home run rate. He's just a target to me. So I wrote up the Red Sox as a stack today. I really like the opportunity to get there. And a lot of the negative leverage, the negative weight on the Red Sox is really just on the top 3 hitters. Everybody else in that lineup on the DK slate, from JD Martinez, Alex Verdugo, Franchi Cordero down, is all in the single digits. And that applies on both sides. A lot of weight on Trevor Story, a lot of weight on Rafael Devers. I love the spot for both of those guys. Xander Bogaerts in the mid-teens on both sites is an offset from those guys. But top to bottom, I think, I shouldn't say top to bottom. 1 through 7, I think you can roster that Red Sox stack pretty aggressively here, and you just find ways to offset it either with the combination of Red Sox bats or just what you put them together with.
Okay. So from there, we can move on. Yes?
Yeah, I would have some minor interest in shares of the White Sox, particularly now that Eovaldi's getting all that ownership.
Well, yeah.
I think they become a little bit more appealing if you're attacking that big of a swath of the field, particularly given that the hard hit stats over the course of this year so far. Last year, he was 36.2% hard hit, which is good, 6.3% barrel rate. So it's not like an ongoing issue for him, but he's yielded some contact this year. And they've got excellent home run bats around, Timmy Anderson, Jose Abreu, Luis Robert, Yasmani Grandal in there. AJ Pollock is a fine correlation piece. All those guys owned in the 1 to 2% range. I'm happy to grab some additional shares of White Sox beyond the field. You don't have to go crazy with it for it to work out.
All right. So moving on here, where we have this Braves and Brewers, Braves, and Atlanta. Lauer is the spend up option, but because of the cost, he has a ton of leverage because of the low ownership. He still has the second highest projected to top 2 pitcher percentage that Alex has in his tools. So it's not even like there's anything other, at least on the surface, reason that people would be staying away from him outside of just cost and trying to spend elsewhere. But to the point that you raised just in general, when we opened up the show, Terry, you're 3 games short now on a 13-game slate. It hasn't transferred as far as ownership over to Lauer.
Yeah, and that's kind of interesting at this point. I think a lot of it is the price, like you mentioned, and then the matchup. He's going up against an absolutely loaded Braves team that is very, very good against both hands. So far this year, they're 18% better than average creating runs against lefties. They've got a 3.10% home run rate, a 189 ISO. Those are all top marks in the sport. The ISO ranks 4th. The home run rate ranks 9th. The WRC plus ranks 9th. They also strike out aggressively in the split. 26.7% strikeout rates puts them 2nd from the bottom in the league so far this season. There are a lot of strikeouts here. Lauer has been very good this season at finding the strikeouts, 36.6% strikeout rate over 23 and a third. That's eye-popping from a guy who was at 23.9% last year. He changed his pitch mix. He virtually eliminated his changeup. He's throwing his slider about 10 percentage points more than he was throwing it last season. So it's his second most frequently used pitch, and it's been really working out for him so far. 13.8% swinging strike rate, 2.25 xFIP. He's been very good in terms of he's been looked at the wrong column. He's been okay in terms of the contact metrics, 38.9% hard hit, 9.3% barrel rate. So those are a little higher than you'd like to see, but not tragic. Against a team like the Braves, though, they're the kind of home run hitting team that can definitely take advantage of that. Guys like Adam Duvall, guys like Matt Olson, even lefty, Austin Riley, certainly Ronald Acuna Jr. from the top of the board. Oh, I just got a note from Mike. Yeah, I didn't have. I had Jesse Chavez, Mike. But I appreciate the heads up.
Oh yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So it depends. Yeah, there's a couple of weird spots from site to site. Like FanDuel has Lorenzen pitching for the Angels today, and we have Jaime Barria, and I have Jaime Barria, as do a number of other sources. So there's a few weird ones in addition to the rainouts and all that craziness too. Where were we? Oh, Ronald Acuna Jr. top of the Braves list here. So top to bottom, everybody knows I like this Braves lineup a lot. So I don't love the prospects for Lauer, but I think at the ridiculously low ownership, he's definitely worth getting well beyond the field on. If you come in, even just 10% Lauer, you're so far beyond the field in a spot where he can pitch through this lineup cleanly 3 times. He can rack up a bunch of strikeouts against these guys. If nobody else is going to be there, I'm happy to. So I'll have both sides of that equation. I'll have some Lauer and I'll have some Braves.
All right, so let's look at it from the other side there as far as the Brewers stack. A little higher of a projected run total for Milwaukee. So there's probably going to be more opportunity or just similar opportunity here from an advantage standpoint.
Yeah, Milwaukee's been a frisky team this year. They've paid off a few times recently. Good amount of power through the middle of the lineup with a Rowdy Tellez, a Hunter Renfroe. Going up against Chavez, who has not made a start so far this season, 12 2/3. So I assume he's not going to get deep into the game. I just was in the process of pulling up his pitching log here. So let me take a look at how many pitches he's been throwing. In his bullpen outings so far this season, Chavez has reached 2 1/3 a few times. So he's been a multi-inning guy, but he's not thrown more than 36 pitches in an outing. So I wouldn't expect him to be long for this game. Maybe you're getting a 2-3 inning opener and then a bullpen game here. Bullpen game, against a Braves team that has an okay one. Last I checked, not necessarily the greatest situation for hitters these days. It's not something that you attack as frequently as you used to, where bullpens were just loaded with, fat guys in their late 30s who didn't throw hard anymore. Now bullpens are elite. Bullpens are loaded with power arms. So it's a different equation. But I think at ownership, it's fine to go to the Brewers here. They don't pop for me, but they do look like a good stack at ownership in terms of my last update. Might have changed in that last update we ran. But I'm getting a handful of guys through the middle, like the guys that I like McCutchen, Tellez, Renfroe, Christian Yelich, even in the mid-single digits. So I think that's fine, and they're all underpriced. Okay,
makes sense, and especially when you look at where they can be as far as ownership is concerned, and things get updated throughout when we have now third game canceled. Yep, that's fine. We'll go to Minnesota here, and let's start again with the pitching matchup and see if there's an opportunity with lower options. I think would be the best way to describe what you have tonight. But from a cheap to leverage standpoint, depending on how much interest you have, well, actually, there's only really one leverage move here, and that would be on Oakland's standpoint. So Minnesota is just kind of rolling with the field if you like that pay down option.
Looking at my list of games, I'm like, wait, we skipped like 4 games. Oh, right.
That's right. Now, don't do that to me after I already messed up twice.
I know. I almost corrected you. I was like, wait, let me think about this first. The pitching in this one, I have it as Zach Logue against Josh Winder. Winder. Is it Winder or Winder?
I wonder. That's a great one. Is that what you said?
That is what I said. Yeah. Not seeing much on the bone for either one of these pitchers.
No. Although Winder is gaining a lot of steam as far as some ownership is concerned here as a cheaper option at 6,400. It's got a pretty strong negative leverage score near 8.
Ooh, wow. Yeah, that's pushing it. Let me see. He did make one start. I want to see how many pitches he threw in that start. This is not a guy I was really digging into through the course of the day. He hit 83. All right. And his bullpen outings were all multi-inning pen outings. He was in the 60s. If he's throwing 80-ish pitches, I guess maybe you get something out of him.
Yeah, but Oakland isn't even like a terribly projected stack tonight. I mean, they're stacked in the middle.
They are a pretty terrible lineup, though.
They are, but as far as projection is concerned, at least, hey, don't blame me. I didn't create the projection, Terry.
Yeah, I mean, that probably makes some sense. You know, you are throwing him up against a rookie pitcher here. And I'm pulling up his minor league stats. He's at advanced levels. It's a small sample, 17 1/3 last year, 54 2/3 in Double-A. He was at a 31% strikeout rate last year across Double-A, 2.84 FIP. So, I mean, he's got some upside, I guess. He's their 4th ranked prospect. He's a little bit better than maybe I was thinking he was. I just didn't think he was going to have the pitch count. So maybe if we're seeing 80 some odd pitches at him at 6,400 against this Oakland lineup, I guess I can endorse that. But now that we're getting into some positive or some negative leverage, it becomes a little bit concerning. But if you're just using him for value, I guess there's nothing really wrong with it on the DK slate. If you're assuming that many pitches, I'm okay with that.
All right, let's look on the flip side here. And again, I mentioned Oakland was kind of right there in the middle. Minnesota a little bit above them, but losing some leverage there because of where we have him projected and also being the cheaper of the options kind of in that mid-range. So you're gaining a little bit of leverage with Oakland if you want to hold your breath and go with it. But Minnesota may not be a terrible option because it's not a really super low negative leverage score either for them. So you can work around that.
We just lost the KC Baltimore game too.
Okay. Well, we expected that one.
Yeah, we were expecting that. We didn't want either pitcher anyway.
We'll update and everything. So
yeah, that'll just shift around some more of the public weight that was getting to those stacks. Because remember,
not going to Eric Lauer, I can tell you that.
A little bit of ownership. Say again.
It's not going to Eric Lauer. We already know that.
Yeah, I'm kind of now hoping that he stays really low owned so that there's at least one like interesting tournament spot on the board, and then the Braves will light him up for 15 runs and be the stack of the day. Looking at the Twins here, they're drawing a little bit of ownership again. It's not nearly as high as it was yesterday, but you're still getting around 20% on both sides on Buxton. I do like the Buxton Polanco top of it. If Gary Sanchez is hitting more toward the middle of the lineup, like in the projected version, I do like that. Max Kepler is always interesting to me. Even lefty against the Zach Logue here. Not really concerned about the lefty. I don't think he'll be in the game very long. So I can get to some Twin stacks, but they're probably around appropriate ownership. They're cheap. They're easy to build into lineups, which is why they get a lot of popularity on these slates. So I do think with some limited interest focused on differentiating those stacks and not getting too deep into, all right, I'm combining the Twins, the most popular pitchers, and the most popular other stack, like the Red Sox or the Astros, let's say. As long as you're not using their value that way, I think it's fine. Get to a couple positively leveraged stacks that still happen to be expensive in conjunction with a little bit more popular value-based Twins.
Okay. So from there, is it just better to look at where you can gain leverage overall? Or actually, we can move on, right, to Houston?
Yeah, I don't really need to get to any of these athletics bats, I don't think.
Again, I gave you multiple options and opportunities, I should say, to kick open that door. I left it open there for you with the Oakland stack 2 times over. You didn't want any part of it, so I'm not going to push again. So
we're talking about a squad with an average, if the projected lineup holds, it's an average of a 132 ISO across the 9 hitters. It's an average creating runs 5% below average, with most of the guys well below that. You're being bolstered by the 149 WRC plus of Sheldon Noose and the 135 of Chad Pinder in that. Everybody else is well below. So it's just not a good lineup for sequential hitting, not a good lineup for power, not a good lineup for run creation. Yeah, I don't like it. That does lead to a little bit more Josh Winder, pushing now 20%. His ownership basically doubled, and he'll probably pull in a little bit more as it gets closer.
Yeah, and his leverage score actually dipped a little bit in against the field. It went in the set from the 7s now to the 6. He's kind of at 6.5 there. So as things get a little later, you may even be able to gain. I mean, if he's down by 5 or so, that would be a significant difference from where he was with that previous game on the board. So Houston, and this is interesting because we talked about Garcia. He's right there at the top as far as ownership, but he's the worst leverage score on the board. So how often at 7,400, clearly there's going to be a great opportunity to work him in, especially where Alex has him projected as a top 2 pitcher. But again, you just keep going back to where he is from a leverage standpoint, and you're giving up a lot getting to him, Terry.
Yeah. So at this point, I mean, we're down multiple aces. We're dealing with a much thinner pitching board. I do think that he's a strong option. I'm looking at the DK board yet. Now he's negative 14.3, but you're dealing with the other solid pitching options. If you're not going to Lauer, you're dealing with negative leverage on everybody. You're dealing with negative leverage on Darvish, Eovaldi, Gilbert, Winder, Merrill Kelly. All these guys now, by virtue of the losing those other pitchers, Sandy Alcantara's on that list as well. So everybody's just pulling negative leverage by weighting their ownership against their probability of being a top 2 on DK. I think it just makes sense to not really concern ourselves so much with that. Focus on the quality of the matchup going up against this Tigers team. Focus on the 7,400 price tag. This is a talented pitcher. Last season in his rookie year, 155 and a third innings, 26.4% strikeout rate, a 3.93 xFIP, 13.4% swinging strike rate, was around average for contact in terms of the quality contact given up. This year, he's given up a touch more quality contact in 21 2/3. The strikeouts are down a little bit at 22.4%. That's why he's priced down at 7,400 on the DK slate.
Yeah.
At 8,500 on FanDuel, he's only pulling 13.3%. I like him even better there, where you're paying a little bit more for him. It's keeping a little bit of the field away. You're throwing them up against the Tigers team that is not very good right now. They were good last year. They were sneaking, over 500 from May on last year. But right now, this Tigers team, 29th in baseball with a 0.094 ISO against righties, 16% worse than average, creating runs with an 84 WRC plus, the worst home run rate in the split at 1.52%. And they strike out 24.3% of the time, the 24th worst in baseball. It's a great, great spot for Luis Garcia. So I actually think that, at least on FanDuel, that ownership is actually light and targetable, regardless of how it works out in our leverage score. And I think he's perfectly acceptable to get to on the DK slate.
What about Bo real quick before we hit the bats?
Bo is going to get hit by the bats, so we can just skip to the bats.
Okay, well, that's fine. Again, the door was open, but if you'd rather just shut it, then we can flip it. So
yeah, Bo's like a middling kind of a prospect. There's not really that much to see here. 15% strikeout rate in his 2 starts, 5 innings each, and he's gotten tagged. So I don't need him.
Now,
Houston, I do like the Astros.
The Angels, not to spoil and bury the lead here, but this thing can update as well, because this still has Baltimore on here factored in. So that's going to be updated rather quickly. But the Angels are right there at the bottom, and there's a pretty significant gap. Nearly half of the score is the gap between where the Angels are and
the Angels or the Astros?
Angels. No, I have the Astros just above them from a negative leverage score.
Right.
I have the Angels.
We're talking about the Astros, right?
We are. I was setting it up for the Astros, though.
Okay.
That's all. You're right. You're right. We don't have enough time for me to have this huge, grandiose explanation about where we are and building this up. I had to do my radio show 20 minutes before here, so I'm sorry.
It's more the fact that we've gone from 13 games down to 9, and I don't remember who's on the slate and who's not anymore.
That's true.
That's more of the old short-term memory and not following where you were going with that windup.
Yeah, but to be fair,
I think the setup was fine. I think that was my flaw there.
All right, but look, just to be fair, right? Maybe you thought, all right, the game was in Washington, and if that's the case, they did cancel Baltimore, which is right over. So you would think
I definitely put that much thought into it, pieced it together along those exact lines. Right. It was an honest mistake, not just me being an idiot.
Oh, no. Trust me. I know the difference with you now.
Clue me in sometime. Most of the time I feel like I'm just being an idiot. Anyway.
All of this was to say that while Houston is negatively leveraged, it may not be as bad because none of the teams outside of the Angels truly have what could be a deterrent as far as a negative leverage score. See, long ways to get to that short answer.
Yeah, absolutely. There are just ways to put these teams together in unique enough combinations tonight. There's a lot of targets that look similar both on the mound and at the plate. So I think you can go to these heavily weighted teams. And within the Astros lineup, there are just spots to offset the popularity anyway. Michael Brantley's below 10% owned for 3,900 on the DK slate. Julie Gurriel is below 4,000 and 6% owned. The back of the lineup, Chas McCormick, 6.3% owned for 3K. Like, there are good spots to put together. Even Alex Bregman at 15.7%, under 5,000 is under owned there. So I like that stack. They were my featured stack in my article today. You guys can check that out on the site for hitter by hitter thoughts. I think it's worth stringing these guys together. Everybody except for Martin Maldonado is a spectacular hitter in this lineup. So I really like getting to Astros. You can put them together in unique ways. I would keep Jose Altuve, even though he's 21% owned on the DK slate and pushing 20 some odd percent, pushing 30% on the FanDuel slate. I think you're carving out too much correlated scoring possibility there. Yep. Like, if this stack connects for a ton of runs, odds are Jose Altuve is going to be a big part of it from the top of the lineup. So I think you're fine building him in. You can build some stacks that are even more differentiated and leave him out. But I do think he's got to be a big part of your plans, even at that heavy ownership. So I'm just going to offset these guys with other low-owned stacks in other spots, low-owned pitching, and I think he can do it tonight.
That makes sense. And with Detroit, how much different is that as opposed to your approach with Houston?
I would have tepid interest in Detroit. I like the Luis Garcia side of that matchup much better.
But they're very low owned. Though, if they could knock his ass out of there.
Yeah, that's it. They're very low owned, and there is the possibility. Like I said, he's given up some additional hard hit this year. His strikeouts are down, his walks are up. So there is some reason to believe that this weak Tigers team can get to him, and they are a good lineup. Like, I do believe in these hitters. Good might be going a little bit far. They're a growing lineup. They're a lineup that I think in a couple of years will be very good, and they've got a lot of individual talent. Javi Baez, obviously, Austin Meadows in the middle of the lineup. Akil Baddoo was very good last season. He had 13 home runs, stole 18 bases in 461 plate appearances. Miggy Cabrera's still got a little bit left. Heimer Candelario, Jonathan Scope, Spencer Torkelson, the premium rookie, down toward the bottom of the lineup. So they play well in terms of how they come together in stacks. They're not really shining through against Garcia for me, but I think based on the leverage available now that he's super high owned and they're low owned and completely untouched almost, I think it's worth getting to some shares of it.
All right, we will get to the Angels, but we have to tell everybody about Luka, and this is how you can refresh your ownership. So anything you need here, Terry, I'll take a second and read through this, and you can refresh all of it. I'll filibuster here for you as long as you need. But look, we've been telling you about the easiest way to pop on with us, and that's this Luka code. $7, 7 full days of Awesemo Plus Platinum, 77% off the usual weekly price. I mean, that is insane. Every time we do something like this, you think, all right, well, at some point, they're just going to be able to stop, right, and hit that ceiling. How much more can they do? How much crazier can they get? And now we have 77% off the usual weekly price. Just use Luka checkout. You know the drill here. And you're going to get projections for everything, all that we can possibly give you, every single DFS sport, player projections, ownership projections. Keep telling you that you don't have to wait one day a week and hope that today is the day that top stacks are free or pitchers are free. You can just get it all and immediately put it to work and just look at our Hall of Fame account or really just random stuff. It's not just Terry knocking people out for 30K in an MLB tournament. It's guys like Terry or Greg or whoever on here just being like, oh yeah, by the way, there's an F1 thing or a tennis thing, and I used our projections and I won some money. So we do all of this. We show you all of this, not just because we like to brag, which we do, but also because this shit works and it's easy to apply and make some money. So jump in. 7 off, 77% off. Just use Luka at checkout. Now, are you okay, or do you need some more time?
I'm just blown away by that discount. I mean, and somebody offers you 77% off of like anything in this life, you got to at least consider it. 77% off a punch in the nose. You got to at least be, well, that's a pretty good price. And somebody's bound to punch me in the nose at some point. So I might as well take it cheap.
You know, that's an interesting quasi poll type situation that if we had a ton of time, if this were like a 3-game slate tonight, we could drum up answers, which would be, what wouldn't you take 77% off of? Right? Like because you're right. You probably find like 5 things, obvious things, right?
Right.
Non-adult. Yeah. You have to like break it to non-adult stuff. All right. Now we can get to the Angels. All right. Now you mentioned where we have a little bit of a discrepancy from a pitching standpoint, but it looks like what you have and what we have on Awesemo is consistent. So we can start there as well as with Washington.
Yeah, so it's consistent in that we both the site Jaime, and right? my data and a couple other sites as well have Jaime Barria going, and no real interest in him whatsoever. So I think we could skip over him. Juan Adon on the mound on the other side of things, kind of figuring it out at the major league level. I think they're just going to give him run. They're not really interested in succeeding this year. I don't think so. 5 starts, 23 and a third, 18.9% strikeout rate, 11.7% walk. We can see a pattern forming here with the 1.67 whip, a hilariously low 6.9% swinging strike rate. The kid is not inducing any strikeouts or swing and miss. He's giving up a ton of hard contact. I think he's kind of doomed against this excellent Angels lineup that has completely converted me in what I think of this team now. So I'd be much more inclined to go toward Angels bats here. The Nationals are marginally interesting, but it's mostly around Juan Soto and, the 3 hitters in the middle, top end of the batting order. Soto's pulling 18% ownership on FanDuel, 15% on DK, mostly as a one-off probably. If you wanted to stack the Soto, Bell, Cruz combo as a 3-man, I'd be fine with that. Not really going out of my way for Nationals bats, even against Barria, and will probably be mostly an Angels bullpen game here.
Okay, so on the flip side, it's the Angels who, as we mentioned, just to rock Washington and all of the leverage from where we have them projected to the ownership. And to be fair, they are not projected super high to be a top stack. Yet the field or the public believes otherwise.
Yeah, it's a little surprising that we don't have them higher than where we've got them right now. I'm taking a look
at it's the inverse of Eric Lauer.
Right. Right. Yeah, he's we're looking at a 4.4%, basically the exact middle of the board on FanDuel. On the DK slate, a little further down than that, 3.7% probability being the top stack. I kind of like this spot in terms of them sneaking past at least our attention. And a lot of the public weight that we're looking at is really coming down on Shohei Ohtani, with more than the average guy on Mike Trout as well. Everybody else in the lineup, like Taylor Ward, Brandon Marsh up top, both in the single digits on DK. Anthony Rendon behind those two in the single digits. Jared Walsh, 12%. That's perfectly fine. On the FanDuel slate, it's very similar. Those numbers go up a little bit. Walsh and Marsh are in the 10 to 13% range. The two superstars in the middle are in the mid-20s. They're a little bit popular, but again, I think it's a situation where as long as you're not going out putting them together with the Astros, who are also super highly owned, and then going to Lauer somehow, and I don't think you could actually do that price-wise, but let's say you could do all 3 of those things. You probably don't want to do that from or not Lauer, one of the popular pitchers, but you probably don't want to do that from a public ownership weight. Maybe you do want to do it with Lauer if you can figure out how to pay for it because he's not owned. So just think about ways to put them together in different combinations with low-owned secondary stacks, low-owned pitching, and you're perfectly fine going to this team here.
All right. So is that really all? Because you mentioned the bullpen scenario here. So I don't know what more you want to get to from this game outside of maybe mini stack or one-off scenarios.
Yeah, I would take one-off shares of maybe some of the Angels hitters that are lower owned. Like I can take some one-off shares of Anthony Rendon for 3,200 on FanDuel, 4,500 on DK. I'm still a big believer in Rendon's talent that's going to come around. He struggled out of the gate, 222, 343, 395, 3 home runs, 173 ISO. Those are not Anthony Rendon power numbers, not even his triple slash numbers. Still creating runs 22% better than average in the middle of that lineup. So he's a nice little correlation piece if you're stacking, but he also functions as a sneaky one-off at low ownership, a guy who could be hitting behind a bunch of guys on base, see a few opportunities to drive in runs, put up a nice fantasy score. So somebody like that, somebody like one of the, the young kids up at the top of the lineup, I can definitely one-off. The superstars are, you're one-offing them with a lot of public weight on it. So I don't love doing that. If I'm going to a superstar one-off, I like to get to them when they're a little bit less popular. Like Juan Soto on the other side, similar story, 15%, 18%. Like I said, he's the only really interesting bat in that Nationals lineup. So I think I'd rather go to him than the Trout Ohtani weight for a one-off from a star caliber. But I think Ohtani and Trout are in better situation overall.
Okay. So Angels, Nats, cover that here. We'll go to the D-backs hosting the Rockies and not in Colorado, right? So in Arizona, a little bit of a different scenario here. Let's look at the pitching matchup. Merrill Kelly is not necessarily a terrible negative leverage score, but is popping up kind of in that mid to maybe bottom top tier range as far as the top 2 is concerned. And then on the flip side, it's Chad Kuhl, and maybe the cost is working against him from an ownership standpoint, but there's a hell of a lot of leverage if you think he could sneak through and do something against Arizona.
I think between the two, I prefer the Kelly side, even with the public popularity. Just going up against the Rockies lineup that has been a little bit less than Frisky so far this season, and I think Kelly's the more talented of the two starters. Taking a look at the Rockies, actually, man, you know what? Honestly, they're a little bit better than I thought. Creating runs and for power against creating runs, they're right about average, but for power, 3.81% home run rate and a 193 ISO against righties. So I'll unwind that a little bit. Maybe the Rockies are a little bit sneakier than I thought here at no real ownership going up against Kelly. That's interesting. A lot of that power is around CJ Cron, who's tied for the league lead with 9 home runs, has a 365 ISO for the season so far. Randall Grichuk, that's an interesting spot. I'm curious now about how that's going to work out. Now I'm going to both sides of this one. I think I'm going to grab some low on Rockies. I just stumbled into it. I was looking at the Rockies earlier in the day on the top stacks, and I kind of disregarded it. I was thinking that they weren't necessarily coming through as strong as they are for power so far in the split. So I'm glad we brought that up. I'm glad we stumbled into it. I think it's a both sideser. Merrill Kelly for his end of things, 3.38 xFIP so far, a 1.02 WHIP, 22.8% strikeouts, limiting the walks, decent with hard contact, similar to what he did last year, 19.5% strikeout rate over 158. He's the kind of guy who can come through and pitch you some clean innings. And if he finds some bonus strikeouts, then he can give you a slate relevant fantasy score. I think he's worth rostering now that the slate's cut down a lot. 22% strikeout rate against righties for that Colorado active roster. It's targetable. It's not great. You'd like to see more than that. I think he's got enough to get by for us. 8,200. There are options that I like better at lower prices though on the DK slate, like some of the guys we called out earlier. So maybe a little less interest in Kelly and a little bit more interest in the Rockies bat as we talk through that one.
Okay, so the leverage, though, to your point, is going to be significantly higher for Colorado than for a lot of other teams here, right? So that's going to factor in on that, especially Arizona. If you look at the opposite, where you're losing pretty much the same amount of leverage that you're gaining by going to Colorado.
Yeah, I think Colorado's the more interesting side of this one to roster now in terms of the leverage scores where they're going to be. They're all owned in the low single digits up and down that lineup. You're getting some pricey bats on the DK slate, which makes it a little bit challenging. 5,700 for Connor Joe, 51 for Randall Grichuk, 56 for CJ Cron. Outside of Coors Field, that becomes a little challenging for those hitters, but I mentioned, Cron's spectacular power so far this season. Every one of those guys is a decent righty bat. They've got some interesting bats around them. Lefties, Charlie Blackmon and Ryan McMahon. Brendan Rodgers is like a post-hype prospect kind of a kid. Samuel Hilliard can put a drive into one from the left side of the plate. So 1 through 7, they're in the projected lineup. They're pretty interesting. It's weird because the current year stuff has not come through in my model yet. So it's not really shining through in like my home run model, which was another reason I was kind of disregarding them a little bit today. So maybe they're a little bit more frisky than we expected. I'm really interested to see how this one, yeah, this is a fascinating spot to me now. I'm sorry to keep stumbling over my words as I'm talking about it, but I'm really trying to decide how I'm going to come down on this one. I think just based on the way they'll come up in crunches, I'll have enough of them distributed through the lineups that I put into my sorting tool. And then the way that my sorting tool is going to regard the top end projections against the ownership, I wouldn't be surprised if I ended up with a fair amount of Rocky stacks just through the process without even trying to go out of my way for them now that I'm thinking it through.
By the way, shout out to Larry C for the color code reference here, because I totally agree that it's much easier now in the top stacks tool to see by color, right? Have you seen?
Oh, this? Yeah. The new update. Yeah. Absolutely. It was weird. I was on the FanDuel one earlier in the day, and it had pushed through on the DK one, and I flipped over to that one to check something out. I was like, oh, wow, this is all nice and colorful and everything.
It's awesome.
Reload the FanDuel one, and it still hadn't been caught up. So FanDuel just gets short shrift every time. But glad that we're there now. I'm looking at it right now. It looks pretty.
Yeah. See, you don't have to see name. You just have to see color.
Yeah.
It's Kramer one.
Makes it easy. Look for that color and then just jump across. 4.9 leverage score on the Colorado Rockies on the FanDuel slate as a stack. That's pretty solid.
Not bad. Not bad. Pretty disappointed that the Seinfeld reference didn't even land with you, but we can move on by all means.
What was it? I didn't hear it. What was it? Sorry.
You can't retell a joke or you can't explain a reference. You have to go back and watch it again.
I will.
No, it was the scene in which right before they throw Kramer out of the studio where he's talking about how he memorizes color and script, remember, before they throw him out in Hollywood. So he's like, so I don't remember lines. I remember color.
Right.
That's all. Bad joke. I get it. Well, let's go to Seattle here.
That's an obscure reference. I gotta say, that's not one of your more popular heard around on the street all the time Seinfeld references. I'm kind of pissed I didn't pick it up. I gotta say.
Well, you were so busy on making your Colorado Rockies point, which was apt and definitely on point. So I recognize
my way around that for 20 minutes or whatever that was. Yeah.
Yeah, but this is a DFS show. This is not a Seinfeld Remember When show. So what you had is
it could be
more. It could be, yes. Let's look at Seattle here. Again, we've dealt with this pretty much throughout the night as far as low projected run totals, 3.4 for Tampa, 3.6 for Seattle. Logan Gilbert on the hill for Seattle. We have Fleming there, Josh Fleming for Tampa. So maybe we should look at just the pitching matchup, and then that's going to open up the conversation as far as where you're looking at the bats as well. So Fleming from just overall.
I have Whistler.
Oh, do you? Okay, I apologize. So
I'm not 100% that I'm
no,
right.
I'll trust you over me.
I'm just pulling it up real quick. He's on Schmantishy Schmebs, where I'm looking for lineups. He pitched 3 days ago, so maybe he's only opening. So maybe it's Whistler into Fleming. That's probably what it is.
That's fine. So you could look at that. Maybe Gilbert would be a better place to start just overall.
Yeah, I think Gilbert's the target here. Whistler, I wouldn't play. Fleming, if he's the announced follower and we're expecting innings on DraftKings, if the price is right, you can get away with it. On FanDuel, I wouldn't want to do it, losing the quality start bonus and not against what I think is a good Mariners lineup here. Logan Gilbert, I definitely want to be a part of the action with tonight. 14.4% ownership at 9,300 on FanDuel is probably a little light. 26 and change on DK for 9,200, probably about the right spot. 24.8% strikeout rate over 28 innings and 5 starts this year. 3.47 xFIP, a 0.93 WHIP. 9.4% swinging strike. You'd like to see him get some more strikes, only a 24.8% CSW. So you want more induced swinging strikes. You want more called strikes from the kid, but he's been reasonably good in terms of the premium contact. He's allowed 46.6% hard hit, which is very high, but he's only allowed a 4.1% barrel rate within that, which is good. So he's avoiding the extremely bad contact so far this season. That's helped him out a lot. So I like the upside for Gilbert. He's going up against the Tampa lineup that's pretty good. It's probably going to be a both sideser for me. I'll probably have some Tampa shares. But I think Gilbert is at least an interesting pitcher on this slate, if not a kind of a go-to now that a lot of the other quality has left the table.
That makes sense. It definitely makes sense. So do you even want to tempt fate with the other side there, or just look at the bats?
Yeah, let's just look at the bats.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
So
let me just attack Fleming.
Let me look at. Do we have Fleming in the?
Tool? Yeah, we have
He's
Fleming
our bottom ranked.
Bottom ranked, exactly.
0.0, the perfect Dean Wormer ranking for his probability of being a top 2 starter on DK, and he costs 6,300. If he was the announced follower getting 4 or 5 innings on the DK slate for 4,000, maybe he could get away with it. I don't see it here. We've got Zach Logue and his $4,000 price with a 3.9% probability, 3.1 leverage score. That's probably your option if you're looking to get super cheap and dirty on the DK slate at 4,000. I don't love doing that with him either there, though. That's not a great spot in my mind.
Seattle, though, and look, some of it is just it's Seattle, I get it, but also against this situation, and you referenced that it's not the best one to attack by all means. You can gain some leverage, and I bring them up because while they are at the bottom per se, as far as our top stack tool is looking at it tonight, Terry, it's not like there's a gigantic gap between Houston and Seattle from projection. There may be in real life, I get it, but at least from projection, this is not a mile-wide gap between top stack projections.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those days where the top team is in single digits. Houston's at the top of the board, 9.5% on FanDuel probability being the best team, 8.9% on DK. So everybody's going to be within reasonable range of that, all the way at the bottom of the board. 3.2%. Yeah, that sounds very low when you're weighing it against 100%, but nobody's at even more than 10% probability. Excuse me. So when you can get to a very quality team like the Mariners lineup here, I really like that idea at positive leverage, despite where they rank in terms of the level on the board. That probability is fairly close to similar. This team, 8th in baseball against right-handed pitching, creating runs 12% better than average. 20.9% strikeout rate is 8th best in baseball in the split against righties. So they're starting out against a righty at least. We'll see where that goes in terms of the bullpen and Whistler into Fleming. right now they line up pretty well for me. I like Adam Frazier up top, Ty France, Jesse Winker, Eugenio Suarez, JP Crawford playing way above his head, creating runs 112% better than average, but he's been doing it so far this season, so we can continue riding it. Abraham Toro, Julio Rodriguez, even Luis Torrens down at the bottom of the lineup, plenty of power as a catcher where you need a catcher. Dylan Moore, kind of interesting, get on base, steal you a base. So 1 through 9, I like the look of that Mariners lineup against the bullpen gamer.
Tampa, Gilbert, this is an opportunity, if anything, just to counter a guy in Gilbert who's catching a lot of ownership.
Yeah, and it is a good Tampa team in general. I think you can go there. Maybe you undercut the field a little bit because the field is getting there some, but you are attacking a decent swath of ownership. They rank out basically in the middle of the league in everything so far this season against right-handed pitching. And like I said, I do think he's a quality pitcher. You're looking at, for Tampa, it's so weird this year with their 141 collective ISO against righties is 14th best in baseball. So that's the middle of the league, basically. 107 WRC plus, creating runs 7% better than average, puts them 14th. 2.33% home run rate, 22.8% strikeout rate, right around the middle in everything. So they've got some upside. They are frisky in terms of creating runs. There are bats that I really like in that lineup, like Brandon Lau, who is under-owned tonight for where he typically comes in under 5% on both sites. We see him above 10% a lot of the time as a one-off, as a part of stacks. Wander Franco, nobody needs me to sell on him. He's been excellent in his young career. Randy Rosarena, Yandy Diaz. There's ways to put this team together. They're not great toward the back end, but the top end is low owned and low cost. So I think you can go there.
Okay. No, and again, it makes sense, especially because of the matchup and being able to gain some leverage on a field if, in fact, they get through to Gilbert. So we can move to San Diego. And this one, we've referenced both guys because of Darvish being up there at the top. And then you've talked about Alcantara just being another cheaper option or a counter, if you will, to a couple of guys that were gaining a lot of leverage. So this is an interesting matchup, not only in its own right, Terry, but just because you've referenced both guys throughout when talking about other guys on the slate.
Yeah, this was one of a couple of games where some premium pitchers were dueling each other. I think this is the only one that's still standing, but I like the pitching matchup here. I think it's going to be a fun one to watch. You're talking about Darvish, who is probably on talent and on, just experience, the most proven starter, the guy who's closest to being an ace or was an ace most recently. And then you're dealing with Sandy Alcantara, who's been a quality pitcher over time. Last year, Alcantara, 205 and 2/3 in 33 starts, 24% strikeout rate, a 1.07 whip, a 3.45 xFIP, 13.3% induced swinging strike rate, was decent with contact, 6.1% barrel rate against the 39.4% hard hit. There's good reason to believe in Alcantara going up against a not great Padres lineup here. This year so far, 21% strikeouts, 11.3% walks. The strikeouts are down. The walks are up. That's a little bit concerning. Swinging strikes, 12.2%, probably just some happenstance around that being down by a couple points. The hard hit is down. That's good. The barrels are down. That's excellent. So I do like the spot for him. I think it's 7,700 on the DK slate. Like I said, you can use him as a very cheap SP1. You can put him and Luis Garcia side by side in the 7,000s and then pay for a lot of really premium bats. So I still like doing that. I think he's got a chance at having a very good game here against this Padres team. San Diego against righties so far this season, they are 20th in baseball with a 128 ISO. They've created runs well. They're 109 WRC plus, so 9% better than average creating runs, and they don't strike out a ton, but they've got a 1.63% home run rate. That's 28. So there's just been no power for this team this year. Eric Hosmer's performed over his head to this point of the season. Jurickson Profar has as well. Obviously, no Fernando Tatis still in that lineup. It's a big hole in the lineup. Manny Machado you can play on any given slate, but I like the Sandy Alcantara side of this one. And then Darvish on the other side, now drawing a ton of ownership, but is, like I said, the most established guy. 29.2% strikeout rate last season while pitching well. This season, he's down at 22.5% over the early goings, only 26 and a third innings. I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be Yu Darvish. And he's going up against the Marlins team that I wrote up yesterday. I think they are better than their reputation, better than they've been over the last few years. They've got a 13th ranked 142 ISO, again, ridiculous, but they've been creating runs 12% better than average, which is 8%, eighth in baseball against righties, 2.39% home run rate. They're another team that's kind of right around the middle of the league. So I think you can kind of both sides that. Maybe you grab some sneaky Marlin stacks. Don't get carried away. They're all under 1% owned. You don't need that many shares, but definitely you can see a path to Yu Darvish carving this team up a few times over and having a really, really strong slate relevant start. 17.7% ownership. I liked it better when he was lower owned for that big price on FanDuel, but I do think he's very, very much in play. So I think you're going to have to be there.
Yeah, and look, I mean, it's kind of the poor man's version of what we had earlier with the White Sox, but you're clearing out a ton. Even if you're getting to them, as you mentioned, 1% of a 150 build, and you're still over the field with
Yeah.
Miami, but you're clearing out a ton of the rest of the field based on how many people are getting and will continue to get to you, Darvish, as stuff gets updated and more things just get plucked.
Yeah, exactly. If I can take 10 of 150 lineups, 6% or whatever it is of 150 lineups and throw it against a guy who's 40% owned here with a lineup that, again, I do think is somewhat interesting with Jazz Chisholm, Jesus Aguilar, Jorge Soler and all his power, Jesus Sanchez and everything he's been doing as a second year player, Avisal Garcia, Garrett Cooper, Joey Wendell are, productive major league regulars who can, they're replacement level type guys, but they're fine in there. So yeah, I can put together Marlin stacks that I think are interesting for the ownership, for the price, and against that Darvish ownership. If I'm saying gun to my head, which side of this is going to succeed, I come down on the Darvish side of that one every time.
Yep.
But I think the Marlins for DFS purposes, game theory purposes are definitely interesting here.
Last game that we have on the slate here. So let's look at this. The Giants Cardinals late tonight. Cobb, Hicks, Jordan Hicks on the mound for St. Louis, and Alex Cobb on the other hand. And reflected in the projected run total here, Cards at 3.5, Giants 3.5, right? 3.4 for St. Louis, 3.6 for San Fran. So Hicks and Cobb now become interesting options, especially because where Alex Cobb is from a cost to projection standpoint, and also that you actually have a bunch of leverage, and he's not anywhere near as expensive as a guy like Eric Lauer, who granted has a little bit higher of a top two projection, but Cobb is gaining a bunch of leverage still.
Yeah, I'm just looking at that. I do not like Alex Cobb. I wrote about this situation from the bats perspective, with St. Louis and all their struggles against right-handed pitching in general, and his ability to find strikeouts when he needs them. I do, with hesitation and a lot of anxiety, say that Alex Cobb is probably playable here. 8,400 is more than I want to pay for him on BK. Yeah. 8,200, I don't think I'll be going there on the FanDuel slate, but I think where you need two starters, he's probably going to be in play. I do just still like those $7,700 options that we talked about from other teams a lot better. Cobb is a guy he's had a really weird career where he just bounces all over the map. Like his last start is a perfect example of that. He ended up not getting out of the first, walked 3, gave up 4 hits, gave up 5 runs, but only one of them was earned. So his expected ERA is in the 1s. His actual ERA is in the 5s. His xFIP is at 2.60. He struck out 28% of hitters, but walked 10%. He gives up, his limited hard hits. He's given up no barrels. He's given up no home runs this year, which is usually his main bugaboo. So it's just a weird pitcher in a weird scenario at a bad price. I don't love it, but with nobody going to it, I do think you can find some quality there. Like I said, St. Louis does struggle against righties overall, but I do like the upside for the St. Louis team as another completely unowned team with a ton of quality hitters. And the one thing they do well is limit the strikeouts. 17.2% against righties this year is leading baseball. So they're going to put the ball in play. And with all the power that he's given up historically, all the power in their lineup, I like still the St. Louis bat side to overcome the Cobb side. But I just think the numbers, the DFS situation of it all says that you should be rostering some Alex Cobb shares here.
I imagine similar to Josh Fleming, when you have that dead 0 number, that you're not getting to much of Jordan Hicks tonight. You probably get to the NFL player Jordan Hicks more than you get to him tonight.
Yeah, I think that would probably be a good move. Looking at Hicks, 3 1/3, the last start made it to 63 pitches. I don't think we're seeing more than like 75 from him here. He's been effective over, the 12 1/3 that he's pitched. 26% strikeout rate is good, but a 16% walk rate, not so good. So with that in mind, with the 14.3% barrel rate in mind and the short start going up against the quality lineup in the Giants, I'd be more inclined to look toward the Giants side of the equation there.
All right, so let's look now as we wind down here. And again, a reminder, if you're hanging with us, you've been hanging with us for this hour, please, we don't ask for much in return. Hit that thumbs up button and make sure you're subscribed here. The Odd Shopper channel as well, from all of the different betting models. You talk about what's been updated here with the color coding on our MLB top stacks. Odd Shopper is constantly being updated. Before you blink, you just, oh, wait, NHL's up there. Blink. Now we have more sports up there. So take advantage from the playoffs as things get a little sharper. You want every little piece of advantage that you can gain, and that's why Odd Shopper. So subscribe to both. And then we have content. Like Ross's pony video is out here for the Derby. So whatever's going on, exactly, we're going to get you covered, but you want to subscribe so that you know when it's happening. So let's look at the bats as we wind down. You mentioned just kind of the opposite, really, from either of these pitchers. St. Louis gaining a little bit. I mean, you've got a pretty decent positive leverage score here. They are somewhat, again, kind of in that middle range of all single-digit top stacks. So maybe there is something you can work with Seattle against Cobb, right?
Yeah, I do think, again, I wrote up the St. Louis stack here, despite their struggles against righties, which I think is part of why they're not quite owned, even with some very good pricing in this lineup today. I definitely think they're worth targeting at this ownership. They're all the highest owned guy on DK in our projections right now is Tommy Edman at the top of the lineup at 1.1%. Everybody else 0.6, 0.5. They're just worth getting to. They're really, really talented hitters. Tommy Edman, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, Tyler O'Neill. You can throw in Juan Yepes now, the infielder, outfielder, premium prospect who's up to a scorching start. Harrison Bader, Dylan Carlson in the outfield as well. You can get to both of those guys. You don't love DeYoung still in there. You don't love Yadi Molina. I mean, I love Yadi Molina because he's a Hall of Fame catcher, and I just have a weird thing for catchers, but you don't love Yadi Molina for DFS purposes these days. So I don't need to get to him, but even where you need catchers, you can, if you wanted to include him, he's okay. But yeah, the premium bats in this lineup, when nobody else goes to them, even at expensive prices, I'm happy to get to them against a pitcher that, again, I think in so many scenarios has been a target for us over the years.
Yep.
If nobody's going to their bats, I'm happy to get there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, same thing with San Francisco, right? You're going to gain some leverage with both of these stacks.
Yeah, San Francisco's on the board. And I tell you what, San Francisco is cheap too. Looking up and down the lineup on both sites, nobody over 5K on the DK slate, nobody over 4 on the FanDuel slate, nobody over 35 on the FanDuel slate. Actually, Jock Peterson, the most expensive bat on both sites, but nobody drawing any ownership. The highest owned player on either site is Brandon Crawford on DK at 3.1% in the middle of that lineup. You can definitely get to some of those lefties going up against Hicks to start the game, and then we'll see what happens. But Mike Yastrzemski, Jock Peterson off the top, Brandon Crawford in the middle, Wilmer Flores, he's better going up against the lefty, but he's fine going up against a righty if he's in the middle of the lineup. Darren Ruff, I get a nice little home run mark that nobody's going to be playing at all for him. Luis Gonzalez is an interesting young player. Tyro Estrada, they've gotten a decent amount out of in the early going this year, and he's got a little bit of skill that nobody's rostering. So yeah, I think they're cheap. I think they come together in interesting ways with some multi-position guys in that lineup. You can definitely get to some Giants in the late game here too.
So this is kind of where we are right now, which is we opened up this show or a little bit when this was scheduled as a little bit longer. And I think first off, just for self-deprecating purposes here, they recognize that it's Terry and I, and we just like to talk no matter what the situation is. So give them a little bit extra. But to be fair, it's a 13-game slate. So we were ready to expand and go deep on 13 games. It's now down to 9, right? We still needed more than an hour, to be fair, to get through 9 games, you and I, and that's just you and I here. But I mean, look, we're done.
I was about to say we could keep going. Some lineups have come out. We can see if anything weird happened in lineups. Like Jaron Duran's leading off for the Red Sox. That's kind of interesting now.
Okay, well, if there's something, or if there's like a tidbit or two that you think is worth mentioning now in the final couple of minutes, that's fine.
Jaron Duran right off the top there, I do think is interesting as the Red Sox leadoff hitter now. His ownership will probably climb. We had it at 5.2%. He cost 2,100 on the DK slate. This is a kid that people were a little bit excited about. He was tearing up the minors last year, came up for 112 plate appearances for a cup of coffee, ended up going 215, 241, 336, created runs 51% worse than average, did hit 2 home runs, did steal 2 bases. He's that kind of a guy. He's like a 15-15 profile kind of a guy. If he's getting on base ahead of Trevor Story, Rafael Devers, Xander Bogaerts, JD Martinez, he's going to be interesting. Bobby Dahlbeck is a guy I always mention in that stack, just all that power at the end of the lineup. So I think you can get there. He's low owned as well. So the version of that Red Sox lineup that came out is a little different than we talked about. And I do think it's still appealing there going up against the pitcher that I want to target all day long in Vince Velasquez. Anything
else that you've seen here from the last hour lineups coming out that has changed, especially because projections updating now without the latest games that were canceled?
just looking around the board, I do still love that Astros stack. I'm getting monster home run marks for the Astros. They were my home run pick, was Jordan Alvarez, and you could get to a lot of these different guys. That lineup came out exactly as expected. Altuve, Brantley, Bregman, Alvarez, Gurriel, Tucker, Jeremy Pena, Chas McCormick. 1 through 8, I want to be stacking Astros despite the weight. Looking around, it's a low rent version of the Athletics lineup, about what was expected for the Tigers. Rockies came out, about what was expected from the Rockies. So I think you can get there. So there's some pretty good configurations of these lineups that game got postponed. So nothing overly wacky. The Jake Berger in the lineup for the White Sox with Reese McGuire, Larry Garcia kind of weakens the back end of that White Sox stack. 6 through 9 in the White Sox. Gavin Sheets, Jake Berger are hit and miss types. Reese McGuire, not that much. Larry Garcia can be interesting for super cheap multi-position eligibility. He just gave you a decent game the other day, but it does weaken the back end of that a little bit against the Evaldi. But we were kind of all about the top end of that lineup for low ownership with Timmy Anderson, AJ Pollock, Abreu, Robert, and Grandal anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking to see if anything else updated here. Doesn't look like as far as with the games that we already had out, right? We're still,
in terms of the top stacks,
just our projections. Yeah, it looks like we're pretty much caught up.
Yeah, it'll probably get rerun again coming up at 5 o'clock at the top of the hour here, I would bet, and then a few times as we head into lock. Okay. Hopefully now a little bit more stable now that we've lost the games that we're likely to lose. Right. I think the only one in any kind of potential jeopardy would be that Red Sox White Sox game, which 35% probability of precipitation from the Schmabs board. Let me pull up Dark Sky real quick and Dark Sky Boston. We'll take a look because that did have rain in the forecast all day. It's just been ugly, but they're clean right now, and it looks like it's going to be clean up until around 10. Clean meaning overcast, ugly, Boston-y kind of a night, but I think they'll play. I think they get through clean.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, look, man, we got the weather. We got.
You want me to pull up my traffic cam?
No, that's fine. I know where I'm going right now, and that's to Center City, Philadelphia. So I am SOL. I'm going to be sitting in traffic for the next hour and a half, man. So by all means. All right, brother. At Digital P21. Make sure not only do you thank Terry for winning you some money, but we always like to see people continue to congratulate. And the statute of limitations for your win is still within time, so you can still congrat Terry by all means. I'm at Shander Show.
For a week out, I gave myself a "What have you done for me lately" on Saturday of last week.
Okay.
You guys gotta. Let's move on.
Okay. Just trying to throw you a bone, my brother.
I appreciate it, buddy. I do. And thank you for the shout out. And thanks to everybody who's been so nice, congratulating me and everything. But let's move on. Let's get somebody else some wins so we can talk about them.
Absolutely, mate. And when you win tonight, tweet Awesemo HOF as well. So
definitely.
We'll see you. Have a great weekend. Have a great night. Enjoy the games.